Hello, everyone. Before we get into this episode, it's important for you to remember to be empathetic and understanding for every single guest that I have on this show. If you enjoy this content, please make sure to subscribe and follow because I do release weekly videos every single week. Otherwise, enjoy the show. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Deep Dives into the Minds of Esports. My name is Blake Panashevitz, and today's guest comes from grinding his way from Hearthstone into the Tier 2 Contenders Overwatch scene that we so love to watch him on. Please let me introduce Chris Lessard, maybe better known as Boopasaurus. Welcome to the show.
How's it going, man? I like the intro. It made me feel good about myself.
That's good. That is kind of what we're going for. I've been working on the intros to get them there. I want them to be clean and concise and
dropping the deep cut Hearthstone knowledge, man. That's a big one.
Yeah, so I'm really excited. So one of the things that I think is really unique about my show, and we're kind of talking about it a little bit beforehand, is a lot of interviews you get pre-recorded questions. It's pretty common in media, and one of the key characteristics about this show is I didn't give you anything. So you're coming into this completely fresh. This is completely you and everything that we can expect to see here, which I think a lot of people are kind of surprised about, but I think it's also fun and unique. So I'm really excited to delve into some of this stuff because part of the thing that I do in order to kind of get ready for these is I literally go through anything and everything about your life that is available on the internet.
Awesome. Sounds good.
We're gonna get started in this, and we're gonna start off really simple. And this is kind of like a passion of my own, which is why we're starting off with this. I watched an interview with Volumel that you talked about Dungeons and Dragons. Okay, now I love Dungeons and Dragons, and to the extent that I love Dungeons and Dragons, it is arguably an addiction for me. So okay. I was just curious, how much do you love Dungeons and Dragons? Is it something you play frequently? Is it something you just dabbled in?
Well, actually, just recently, I just started 2 new campaigns with 2 different groups because I thought that, one of my other DMs was like a really good friend of mine, right? And I was like, but I'm not getting enough of this. And so I had to start with another group. So one of the groups, it's a little bit more of like, I'm playing a little bit more comedically. I'm playing a barbarian named Barbara Cunningham. Has a lot of stories attached to her. Somehow she's got an 18 intelligence. I don't know why. So when I made Barb, it was like the first time I had ever played D&D. And I just went online and did like an online tool where they just gave me all my numbers and stuff like that. I ended up having pretty high charisma and intelligence. And so I can just go around and kind of do whatever I want. And so during our first campaign, there was a barkeep that I thought was a little sketchy. So I ended up tying him up with my friends and interrogating him. We did a spell of truth on him. He ended up being completely kosher and completely good to go. And that was really funny. And because my charisma was so high, I was able to talk my way out of it. And so that was super fun. And then just recently we started a new campaign with another guy, and it's going to have guns and stuff, which I'm really excited about. And it's a steampunk oriented world that he custom made. And I know they're and so I'm playing a goblin gunslinger on that one named Paula Flarp. Yeah. And so, so to answer your question, actually, before I delve and pontificate into my own D&D stories, because there's a ton for Barbara, I started playing about 2 years ago. Mm-hmm. And it was because I had just met so when I was with my ex, I was just on the brink of becoming a nerd, right? Before my current husband, I was like, oh my goodness, I like playing games. And he's the one that got me into League of Legends. And then I broke up with them just when I was ready to get into D&D, right? And I was like, oh no, no, I can't play D&D. That's you know how your relationship's good when that happens when you end it. I can't play D&D. But then I met my current husband about 5 years ago, and he ended up being just right up there as well. And I remember on my dating apps and stuff, I was like, this guy has to be a gamer, right? I need to keep being nerdier. And because this is me, I finally found myself. And he's actually the one that ended up getting me into casting eventually. I'm sure we'll cover that. So I'll save that story for another day. But then he and I were talking. I was like, okay, I'm sorry. I need to play D&D, right? I need to get this. I need to get this going. And then we found out that one of our really good friends, Gerald, would love to have a campaign, and he was dating a new person at the time and needed an excuse for him to meet his friends and thought that this was the best way to do it. And so that's how we started our first campaign about 2 years ago. I ended up not liking that dude and this is why Barbara's really annoying. Because he was a rogue and he wanted to be all sneaky. So because I was a barbarian, I just took the opportunity to just be as not sneaky as possible.
You're one of those people. Okay, I got you. You're one of those people.
Not in my second campaign. Not in my second campaign. I'm taking that much more seriously. I think because the people around me are taking it more seriously. I'm a product of my environment. And then, but that first one, I was like new, and I just love role playing. So I just like went heavy into the role play and be like, my character would do this. And so on her list, within 10 minutes of the game, she forced someone to kill herself. She ate. Yeah. We got surrounded by rats, and my action was I eat them like apples. And I passed 7 poison checks in a row. Yeah, that's Barb for you. I love her. She's my spirit animal.
So I have to ask you, a lot of people when they first start playing D&D, a lot of times their first characters kind of stem from themselves. And I will definitely say that I'm very guilty about this. Okay, and it's very common actually when people first started to get into D&D, they're like, what do I play? And they don't normally think, I want to play some other thing. Like sometimes you get some different tropes, like I want to play Wolverine or something like that. But a lot of times people pull a lot of what like themselves and who they are and to kind of extrapolate on themselves and kind of grow themselves almost in a way. Did you do that with any of your characters?
I actually think Barb and I have a lot in common. Our humor is very similar. So something that a lot of people don't know about me, and I think part of it is because my name's Boopasaurus. It sounds so nice and so clean, right? I am a huge troll. Like, I am an asshole to my friends. I grew up on the East Coast, and that's kind of how like we talk to each other over there. And so I love just being purposely annoying sometimes. And so when I get to play Barb, I get to like do that in an appropriate setting.
Yeah.
Because if I do it in like real life, then I'm just being a dick. But in the game, I can be a dick with no consequences. So I can go ahead and go in there and be like, I'm Barb, hear me roar. And I just love another reason why I think we're a little bit of a spirit animal is she does like what she is a lawful good character. Right. So the reason why she caught that person was she saw someone doing something shady and she's like, look, someone's doing something shady. And that person freaked out and killed themselves. And so, even though she's got a little bit of, that humor behind her, she's still good at heart. And I think that's a lot like me. But I definitely don't eat rats like apples. And,
that's good. But if you could, you would, right?
Maybe if that was again socially acceptable, or if we were playing a game where we did that, yeah. I guess it could work. But Barb was like a really good way for me to like experiment with like actual role playing, right? And that was like a lot of fun. So even though we probably have more similarities than my goblin gunslinger, Paula, I think the overall arching theme is like I just like being funny and I like being a troll and I like being annoying and I get to play a character like that and that's super fun.
So you mentioned that you grew up on the East Coast. Where do you grow up in?
So I spent most of my time in Washington, D.C. So
I've been to D.C. It's really good. I had some amazing she crab soup in D.C. one time when I was there doing a presentation. So good.
You got a good chili, too. Next time you're over there, that's what you need to check out. D.C. chili. George's Chili Bowl, I think is what it's called. Another very awesome person in the esports world, Cookie Bandit, Katie. In the Call of Duty world is from there as well. But yeah, I lived there for, at least 6 years. My dad was in the military, so we moved around a lot when I was younger. He retired Army, and then he retired when we were in Georgia, and we lived in Georgia for about 2 or 3 years. That was like the longest I lived in a place. And then we moved to Virginia, and that was for 6 years. And then I came to college here in Colorado.
Any brothers or sisters?
I have one. Good old Christine. We're pretty close. It's actually the Lessards have a very specific brand of charisma and humor that we all have, and when we get together, it creates a powder keg of emotion, and I love it. So I wouldn't have it any other way. So my sister and I are pretty close.
What's the age difference between you two? 7
years.
She older?
Yeah, she's older. So she's going into her 30s. I'm about to turn 29 in like 3 weeks, which is kind of scary.
I'm 27, so it's scary. I understand.
27 was a good year, by the way. I loved 27.
Really?
That's when I got on Contenders.
I think. 26 was good for me. I'm not looking forward to any more. So I imagine that you were that annoying little shit of a brother who just like pestered her all the time, weren't you?
So actually, this is a really interesting question because pre-15-year-old Chris is very different than post-15-year-old Chris. So pre-15-year-old Chris, I was really quiet. I had like a weird thing where like I hated being in pictures. So in order to avoid being in pictures, I just didn't smile. But then that ended up becoming like a calling card of mine, and it stopped working. And so everyone just kept taking pictures of me because they thought my face was funny. And I met a friend in high school that that I ended up becoming really, really close with. And she was like, because my dad was in the military and we moved around so much, it was hard for me to like make friendships that lasted a really long time. And so when I finally met her, she was the one that was like snarky, and we made fun of our friends a lot. And I was like, this is funny. I like this. And so I kind of learned it from her. So after 15, she really helped me come out of my shell and like really develop my own brand of like acidic humor at the time. And so pre 15 years old, I was like super quiet. I was a little bit of a shit sometimes, as all little brothers should be. I actually proposed when I was like 7 years old. I actually proposed to one of my sister's friends. Janice, poor girl. I got the ring from one of those like quarter things where you put the quarter in and you turn it and like a plastic thing comes out, and the ring was in there. And she said no.
Yeah. And that's probably for the best, seeing as how things turned out, right?
Yeah. But yeah, after I went to high school and kind of like found my humor and found myself, things changed. So that's actually a really interesting question. I always tell people that Chris is divided into like two phases, like the super, super self-conscious, pre 15-year-old, and then kind of out of the shell post.
So I kind of want to talk about that pre-Chris a little bit, kind of growing up. You mentioned that you switched schools 3 times, right?
More than that, actually. I switched.
Was it every 2 years?
It was every 2 years.
Okay, that's pretty military standard, so I wasn't sure.
5 or 6 schools.
Okay, so what was it like swapping schools every time? And was there any moments at schools that you particularly remember as being like really awesome and great, or some that were maybe on the other hand that you were like, wow, this is terrible? Because I know that school for me was very ruthless for like most of school growing up, and people were very mean, but I'm like a dork, and there's a lot of reasons why, but school was very ruthless for me for most of growing up. And I imagine changing every schools, there's no way not to have at least 1 or 2 of those schools that were pretty ruthless.
Yeah. And so very, very interesting, because while I was living in that world of the military school, right, I didn't quite know how it would affect me like 15 years later. So I'll go into more detail about that, because there was the general bullying. A lot of people, I was pretty heavily bullied when I was in elementary school. I was a pretty easy target because I was quiet. And so people would come up to me. And since I'm actually half Asian, and people wouldn't believe me that I was half Asian because I don't look super Asian, that was like a big point of contact, that people would come up to me and be like, your mom's not real, your mom's not Asian. And that like really hurt. And when you're like 6 or 7 in first grade and you don't look like your mom all that much, you're kind of like, wait a second, maybe there's a little bit of truth. I actually ended up like bringing pictures into school to prove that my mom was Asian. That's how bad it got to a certain point. But the reason why I said that like really didn't start affecting me truly until I was older was when I started hearing people go, oh yeah, my friend for like 15 years, right? Or like I've known my friend that's friend my whole life. And then I was like, I don't have any of those. Like my longest friend at the time, I was there for like a year. So I think what ended up happening was I got really used to like letting go, right? That every 2 years I just made new friends, right? And that's just kind of how life was. And then when I became an adult and in college that helped when I was a freshman. But after college, I lost contact with a lot of them because I just didn't know how to keep contact with people, right? And so yeah, it was pretty ruthless for a couple of those schools, especially the ones where I was like heavily bullied. Middle school was pretty rough, but in middle school I found music, and that was a kind of like a big turning point for me in order to like deal with all of that. But before that, it was pretty hard because I wasn't traditionally a very masculine kid either. And when I was in like these military bases and these military schools, that's kind of what gets propped up for you. I was still good at sports, but I just wasn't like outwardly masculine or cared, and all my friends were girls, and my dad had a problem with that, and that was a pretty rough time being surrounded by that kind of culture. But once we moved to DC, a lot of things started to change, and actually in DC, that's when I kind of feeling like, oh, people think differently here, right? I lived in the South before that, and so a lot of things that were it was Hinesville, Georgia, so it wasn't like I was in like a cool part of Atlanta. I was in like a southern part of Savannah. I was an hour south of Savannah, and surrounded by a lot of ideals and stuff that I now disagree with, but back then didn't have like the power or wherewithal to separate. And so once I moved to Virginia and I was in like the political world of DC, there were a lot of independent thinkers. And that was, I think, really important for me to kind of learn that people thought differently than my family and, the kids at school and even myself. And I was able to grow as a person, I think, a lot for it. And so, yeah, it was pretty rough at the beginning.
I have to ask you, you mentioned that you left schools a lot and you were really okay with kind of letting go of people. Does that mean you also didn't really build that close of relationships with people, that you were kind of always going in there knowing that I'm going to end up leaving in 2 years, so there's not really any reason to become close friends?
So I think a little bit on the counter to that is I ended up becoming so what I would do, and actually I still kind of do, is I ended up just befriending one person really hard. Right. And so it was Sarah when I was in Georgia. And then when she moved, it was James. And then after James, it was singular people. And I, of course, had other really good friends. It was actually interesting when I was in Georgia. I had Cameron and Joe, and we were just all so quiet. So we just we were 7-year-old kids that just sat down doing nothing. It was odd. And but we were really good friends. And when we would do stuff, we would pretend to have superpowers. So I got to do the kid thing, but instead of casting a wide net and being the class clown or something, I was pretty one person oriented. That did change a little bit when I was in college, where I became super outgoing, and I would consider myself someone who is I can go into a group of new people and talk to them pretty much with no issue. I do get nervous sometimes, but in the end, I always think that once you're on. There's no way to get out of it. So you might as well just do your best, right? And so when I turned 18, and in my head in college, I was like, I'm going to be different than I was in high school, right? I started making a ton of acquaintances, and I still didn't really like that. And actually, I ended up bonding a lot with this girl, Becca, who just recently moved back to Boulder, a couple months ago. And so I now have a friend that I've had for 12 years, and that's really cool to think about. And in college, though, I spread the net a little wider, but I still had my people. And that's been very common for me throughout my life. And that's why ham is so important to me. I don't give myself to I a group of people. I'm open and I'm honest about a lot of things, but the people I tell everything to are very few and far between.
Okay, that kind of makes sense. So one of the things you mentioned is that your mom was Asian. I believe you said in a previous interview she's Korean, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so I have to ask you, what's that dynamic like growing up underneath was it a traditional Korean household kind of there? How traditional? I've had some people who, I had Jamerson on, obviously, and he comes from a very Korean standard background. How close to that are we getting here?
So this is super interesting to me. As another thing as an adult that has kind of lend itself to the light is a lot of women in Korea that end up marrying particularly military men and then do end up moving to America. They really want their kids to have an American life, right? My mom really wanted us to have the American dream because that's what she was living. So we never learned Korean. And as kids, we were actually pretty isolated from Korean culture outside of food. And, I think that lends itself to the fact that I, for a very, very long time, did not connect with my Korean ethnicity until I started really diving deep into it, until I took a class of Korean history in college, really. But in school, my poor sister, she got the more traditional, you need to get an A, you're playing 6 instruments, you're going to be a doctor or lawyer. And she totally just gave up on me. I don't know what happened, but I failed a bunch of classes in high school. I failed geometry, and she was like, oh, it's okay, my boy, you'll do fine. Where my sister would have been straight up grounded. Maybe over that first 7 years, my sister just broke them down or something. That's what I like to say. That by the time I came around, they were just ready to have it easy. Right. And, but I do not, one of the things that I wish I had was more interaction with Korean culture, with her family, because, my dad never learned Korean. I never learned, Korean. I did at the end of high school, but then my accent was so bad, my mom preferred to speak to me in English.
That's pretty bad.
Oh, that's a pretty Asian mom thing to say. So I got a lot of it in stages, but definitely not as bad as my sister. My sister was definitely part of the tiger mother household. And I think she's 7 years older. So I think she did kind of protect me a little bit in that world and teach my mom that things could be separate. But then on the other side was the military side of things too. So it's still pretty strict.
I was
I
going to ask you,
remember,
what's that military side like? Because both my parents are actually military, and my grandparents were military. So I have to feel like there was probably that military lifestyle that probably actually works really well with like almost like Korean lifestyle. I feel like a lot of times.
yeah. I think the term we all use is that tiger mother, right? There's a book that was written not too long ago about tiger mothering, and a lot of our Asian moms do that. But she was also very stereotypically like Korean mom. So I have a lot of those like really funny stories of her like trying to say a word she can't say and just like spending 10 minutes getting there and it being totally different. I'll never forget when she was saying gracha for lawnmower. And I was like, okay. And she, there, and like the other things, like for my sister, I remember one time she like pinched my sister's arm and went, careful. And because she's Korean and cute, like it was really cute and funny at the time. But then you're like, wait a second, that's not okay. And but yeah, living the military life was really interesting. Looking back on it, because it was so not me. I'm so not that person. And I just kind of was living in it. I had it high and tight for a very long time because it was the only haircut I knew existed. I had to call my dad command sergeant major for a while because like it wasn't because he forced us, it was because he was so used to responding to it, and he just like was so aloof that like when we'd be like dad command sergeant major Lessard, he'd be like what? And so that was a thing for a while. And I think the reason why we got good grades and stuff was because of a combination of both. But when I hit high school, I just kind of gave up, man. I just like did not want to do homework anymore, and my parents had no idea what to do. And then I realized that college was like the way to get out of the East Coast. And so I needed to like get things going. I needed to get my SAT score to be high. And so I started being a lot better when I was a junior. But yeah, it was an interesting dichotomy. I didn't get like the tiger mother as much, but I definitely lived some of it.
Yeah, now you mentioned in middle school, that's when you started picking up music, and you told the whole story on Volumil's podcast about the Stradivarius trumpet, which killed me inside because I did music education briefly in college. I loved music growing up too, and so when I heard that, definitely a part of me was like, oh my god!
I know you want to slap me in the face, right?
I know, yeah. I did.
Yeah.
I won't lie. I was like, wow, you deserve to be like just beat. And one of the cool things was you mentioned that you kind of switched to tuba for a girl, and the cool thing and where I'm kind of leading up to is this is before at least I don't know if you knew at the time or anyone else knew at the time, but you are obviously not into women because you have a lovely husband. Yeah. Okay, did you know at that time that?
No, I actually did not know until way later because I think it was more so the military culture, but also in Korea they didn't recognize that gay people existed until 2001. Yeah. And so I was not my family culture was not in a healthy place at the time for me to be me or even explore what that even looks or feels like. And that was really hard when I was younger, because once I started getting to high school, I started having a little bit of like idiosyncrasies that were a little bit more on the feminine side or a little bit of a lilt in my speech. But when my dad heard these things, right, it was really jarring for him. Yeah. And he's gone through, just to preface all of this, because there's going to be some negative things said, but he now is he's the most supportive he's ever been, and he's totally over it. And he's gone through a transformation. And that tells me that if you are struggling with your sexuality and you're deciding whether or not to come out, my dad, I think, is a story of someone who was military, who kicked me out of the house for it, who, didn't appreciate me for me. We didn't speak for 2 years because of it. And he's able to go over to the other side and transform his ideals. Then it's possible for other people too. And so I know a lot of people have lost hope in that regards, but honestly, if my dad can go through that transformation, I think other people can. It was a very, very slow process, but I played a lot of sports. I played tennis. I was super into music, and I had actually these poor girls. I had 3 girlfriends in high school. And the reason why I say these poor girls is because I was like, I didn't know it at the time, but it was because I just wasn't attracted to them, right? Like we would never go on dates. We just like hold hands at school. And that, and that was about it. I didn't know or want to do anything else, right? I just liked hanging out with them. And so poor Jamie Swagger, we dated for 9 months and I kissed her once. Yeah,
That
yeah.
poor
And
girl.
after, yeah, I know. And then after I kissed her, I was like, something's not right. This is not fun. And and so yeah, poor Jamie. That's the one where I like wish she knew. And then I started dating another girl named Ellie, who I ended up coming out to. She was the first person I ever came out to. And I was like, Ellie, I got to do this, right? Like, I'm sorry, this ain't working, and this is why. And she was totally cool about it. And that was at the like nearest the end of my senior year before college. And if I didn't have that experience, I most likely would have been in the closet when I was in college.
Mhm.
But what I did was I went to college and I was like, okay, I'm 80% straight, 20% gay. I like set those boundaries for me. And then throughout college, those percentages started changing. and then I met my first like serious boyfriend when I was 19. And I was like, wow, this is so much like this is what I wish I had in high school. So I had to like go through all of that again in college. But the thing that I regret, like one of the things I regret the most is looking back, I was at a very liberal high school, very, very liberal high school where a lot of people were, I think there were like 6 or 7 people who were out, which I thought was a lot at the time. We had, my first experience with someone who identified as they/them was there. And at the time I was like, oh, that's interesting. But it was because I think people felt open because it was such a liberal school. Definitely was on the more DC side than the Southern Virginia side. And it's so accepting. And I wish I knew that. And I was even friends with some of the gay kids who identified as gay in high school. And because of my home life, I just didn't approach the subject at all. It wasn't an option.
Growing up to that point, I imagine you went to a lot of different schools that were probably the exact opposite, like extreme, where they were very much extremes. And I remember growing up because we're pretty close to the same age. Definitely, like homophobic slurs were very, very at least for me, were very common growing up. They're not, I wouldn't say they're probably as common now, but I know that like that was a common thing that everyone would kind of go to in order to try to degrade someone. And I don't know if that was what it was like for you, but I remember like that being like my life kind of growing up and how terrible it was. And I couldn't even imagine like struggling at all or not being able to explore yourself when all this stuff is going on, especially at these very much opposite ended schools.
Yeah, I was lucky enough to be a little older when I was in high school. I was bullied for a totally different reason. It was because I was an asshole. And we talked about that a little earlier, right? Where, I just didn't vibe with some people. It was more like a trench warfare type of situation than like bullying. Because I fought back with my acidic tongue as we bring that back. But it's funny, like I talk like I'm proud of that, but I'm not. But the biggest difference between like middle school in Georgia versus high school in Virginia is it's like unspoken. Right. Like even things just like what you do at school will determine what people think of you. Yeah. Right. And so I remember being in Georgia as young as like, or even in other schools after we moved there from Hawaii, just like really young, trying to be more masculine, forcing myself to be good at sports. And I don't understand. Again, I think there's a lot of stuff that you do as a kid where you don't really understand the weight of it until you're a little older and you can kind of unpack being like, oh shit. That was intense, right? Like I went through that. And that's kind of how I feel about my time when I was really young in these schools, because I think my dad kind of saw it happening. It probably happened when I made him take me to Spice World, the movie. So I was like, how did you not know after that? And then, so he took me to like Spice World and like everything changed afterward. Like he was trying to like get me to church a bunch. Like I went to a lot of therapy. I went to like a quasi, like, I think he wanted it to be conversion therapy.
I was just going to ask, did you ever get put through anything like that?
It wasn't like that, but I think that's what he wanted at the time. Again, he's totally different now. He's gone through a lot of growth, and it's some of the most amazing progress I've seen in a person ever. But at the time, it was really hard to constantly have to think about the fact that what you are is incorrect, right? And what these feelings are not valid and incorrect in your life. And all you have to do is change.
Yeah, I think to put it in perspective, I mean, gay marriage wasn't even legalized until like what, 2000?
Obama, yeah.
Yeah, 2016? Is it 2016 or 2015? One of those.
I actually don't know the exact date. I should, but
I think it was. I want to say it was that, but but like this was back in like early 2000s, right? Like, So, because you graduated probably right around 2008, so you're looking at like the 2000s, and very, very, like, as weird as it sounds, like I feel so old saying it was a different, like there was a lot of things that are different.
The year
than,
2000
like,
was 19 years ago,
I
right?
know.
And the progress in terms of social progress amongst gay men specifically has been very good for the last 5-10 years. Very, very, very much so since gay marriage got legalized. That's when a lot of it kind of just started becoming normal, right? But that wasn't the case when I was in high school, and there was a very strong, conservative and liberal type of dynamic where both weren't okay with gay marriage. It was the tail end of that, but the Defense of Marriage Act in the 90s, a lot of old Democrats in Congress have recently changed their opinion on gay marriage. Some of the current candidates have had to change what they've said about gay marriage 10 years ago because society has changed, and the advertising around being gay was so wretched back in the 80s and 90s that I understand that it takes some people to transition, right? And transition their beliefs, and people take time. And my dad is a shining example of that. So is my mom. Like, again, gay people were not recognized as real in her country until 2001.
Yeah.
So like for her to have a gay son, and for my dad to have a gay son, to have, her being Korean, my dad being military, was literally the worst that could happen. And what my dad described to me recently, he's like, a lot of it had to do with the fact that I thought you were going to hell, right? Like that gay people go to hell. And the last thing I want is my son to go there. So I tried to do whatever I could in my power to make sure that didn't happen. And I went a little too far at times. And I was like, you did. And that makes sense. But still, right? Like that's the type of thought process that I think controls a lot of thoughts in society in a negative way.
So I have to ask you, was your family highly religious then?
Yes, we were. And that's actually how I got into music, was because of church. And so we went to this awesome Southern Baptist church called Live Oak Baptist Church. The singing was great. We had a ton of great food afterward. But I'm not particularly religious, not religious at all. And that was it. And that happened like 2 years ago. And my dad was like, "This is worse than you being gay." I was like, "Okay, I think this is progress." And so I'm like, okay, this is cool. Maybe if I just give him something worse, then he'll be able to build upon that. But yeah, it was hard. It was really hard to kind of go back to the beginning. It's like you're surrounded by all these things, and I was athletic. I was really good at tennis at the time. I was, I was really good at the tuba. I was doing everything I think I needed to do, but I wasn't acting the way that my dad wanted me to act, or surrounding people wanted me to act, because I didn't have male friends until like 3 or 4 years ago. And I surrounded myself with women, and my dad was always like, "So who are you dating?" And I just would never want to talk about it. And I think he started seeing, the writing on the wall, and tried to do his darndest to make sure that it didn't happen. But it's me, right? And it was always going to. And when I was 19, I officially came out. I like to joke for the second time, because there was a moment when I was 17 where I explored coming out to them, and they just don't remember it. And I think it's because they blocked it out. Right. And so when I was 19, I finally came out to them, and because in college I was exploring that part of my sexuality a little bit more, and it was me, like it was right, it was correct. Yeah. And when I started being able to watch more representations of gay men and women on TV at that time, because I wasn't restricted on that. I didn't have to hide it or watch it on my laptop. I could just watch it, right? Like two men in a relationship in a show, right? Yeah. And slowly but surely, I realized that I was normal, regardless of who I liked. And if you didn't agree with that, that was on you, not for me to change. And being in Boulder, Colorado, one of the most liberal cities in the country, was a very good place, I think, for me to be in and explore that part of my emotional state, because no one had a problem with it. And that was a huge deal, because I thought that when I was like, I'm bi, people would be like, "Oh, that's gross, you're going to hell." But not a single person since I've been in Boulder has had an issue with it. This is a place I feel comfortable holding my husband's hand, right? And wearing a wedding ring and being myself. When I leave, especially when I go to a southern place or or a country that might not be as friendly, we do adjust our behavior. But here I don't have to. And that's been great. But it was hard. It was really, really hard
What
Very
was that
hard as a kid.
conversation like when you had to, because you mentioned that it did not sound like it ended very well when that happened.
So I kind of like, it wasn't like a you guys should sit down thing. I was like really pissed off, and I kind of just dropped it, and I was like, "You're mad at me because I'm gay, isn't it?" And then they were like, "What?" And my mom started crying. My dad got pissed, and we kind of just like left it at that. I actually had a friend over at the time from Colorado. We were teaching marching band at my old high school, and she was there. Poor girl. But I think she was there because I needed like a little bit of a safety blanket, right? That if like things went to shit, like someone was there and like it would check their behavior. And yeah, so I'm glad that she was there. She already knew, right? She was one of my best friends all through college, and yeah, so it just kind of ended at that, and we just didn't speak about it for a really long time. And then my dad called me once when I went back, and he started the conversation. So are you still gay? And that's how he started it. And I got pissed. I was livid. And I was like, no one here has an issue with this, right? Like the only people who make me feel this way are my parents. And at this point, I think it's on you. And then like we got into a pretty rough fight, and then we hung up, and then he called back like 3 weeks later and was like, "You still gay?" And I was like, "Oh my goodness." And so I was like, "You still straight?" And then he's like, wait, never thought about that before. And I said that, and I was like, "You know what, Dad, like, it's not healthy for us to talk right now." And, I was going through therapy at the time. This is something that she recommended. It's like,
setting proper boundaries.
Yeah, exactly. Like he is your father, but if he's constantly providing you these feelings, and if you can't talk for 5 minutes without getting into a fight, like you need to set up these boundaries, right? And so I was like, you know what? Until you're okay with me, I'd rather just not talk. And when you're ready, you can call me. And if you have questions, you can call me. But as of right now, like, I think we should kind of just take some space. And that was 2 years long. And then finally, because I had said, "You still straight," over those 2 years, he had to really, really tackle his religion, his military background, but also his son, who he loved. And then he, 2 years later, went to PFLAG meeting and started learning about what it's like to be a parent with a gay child, rather than having to the military or confirmation bias type things, letting him know, because he would send me articles about how to change being gay and how to, not be who I am. And he'd be like, "This is a real doctor, see?" And because there's a doctor in front of the name, this is a real therapist. Yeah. And, this is why you probably think this way. And then he went through a weird, odd phase where he blamed himself for me being gay, right? It was like, "Oh, it was because of, I didn't make you do these things. We didn't go camping enough. We didn't do this, and this." It's a very common thing when it
almost
comes
like
to
stages
parents.
of grief. He was like, it was almost like he probably felt, I imagine, that he had lost his son to some degree, and he was going through stages of grief. That's what it sounds like.
Yeah. And I understand that that's really hard, but still, like, I don't think it justifies the behavior. And then eventually he called me back, and I could tell in his voice he was ready. Right. And it was like, I'll remember this moment my whole life, because I was waiting years for it to happen. And then this was about, so that was 2 years. So when I was like 24, 25, I'm 29 now. He called me, and he was like, "I was at church, and my pastor said something about gay people. And I realized you didn't represent evil at all. Right. And I realized that I disagreed with my pastor, not with you." And I was like, okay, we're getting there. Like, this is big. It had been 2 years, right? And so, like, and then after that, it was still odd, right? And so it was still really hard for him. I could tell it was like he was doing these things not because like it felt good. It was because he knew that was what he needed to have a relationship with me, right? But eventually, it ended up changing his worldview, along with my mother's, because like actually 2 years ago, someone told him that I was going to hell, like straight up, like, "Your son is going to go to hell because he's gay." And then my mom apparently stood up and goes, "You're divorced." And like, in front of like a whole group of people, and she's like, "And like, you've had an affair." And so, and then it was like, "You're telling me my son's going to hell when you guys are all doing bad things, right? Like, what is this?" And so they changed churches. They haven't been to a non-gay friendly church since. When I told them I was getting married, I was like, my dad was like, "So I have a lot of studying to do." And I was like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "Do I walk you down the aisle? Is there like a bouquet? Like, what do I do? I'm so excited." And I think it's also because my sister has had some trouble with love. and that I was definitely always going to get married first, and so they were like ready to go. And then poor them, I ended up eloping, and so there was no.
Wow.
Well, Trump got elected, and I was like,
Yeah.
and we got a little worried. We were like, okay,
Yeah.
let's get married now, and we'll just have a ceremony later. But then we realized, since we're already married, like we don't want to plan a ceremony.
Yeah, it's expensive.
Yeah. The only thing we did was actually taste cakes. I got cake taste again, but that's it. Yeah.
Me and my girlfriend have been dating for 5 years, and that's one of the things that we always go back to is like, we wouldn't be opposed to getting married, but I'm like, I don't want to spend that amount of money on a wedding. Like, but your entire family will request a wedding. Like, I know them well enough to know that if we do not have a ceremony, they are going to freak. So, like, I could,
My dad is still, he doesn't say he's upset because I think he understands why I did it. It's like one of those, like, it's the world we live in now type of situations. Yeah. But he brings it up like every time we talk on the phone. It's like, man, I wish I could have been there. And I was like, but no one was there. Like, it was just us, and it was really romantic, and I actually really liked it. It's funny because I'm a caster. I obviously love attention, but that kind of attention is not what I like. And that was a moment for, my husband and I at the time, and I just always thought that vows were super weird to say in front of a group of people because that's for each other. And so we said our vows. They're from the heart. So Colorado is actually one of the only states that you can self-solemnize your marriage. So you don't need a witness to get married here in Colorado. Really? So our dog, rest in peace, Oslo, at the time is our signatory. So there's a dog print on our marriage certificate, and it's actually really funny because she legitimately shit right after we said our vows. Like we had just gone on like a small little hike. She obviously needed it. But the timing of it was really good for her character development.
Yeah, that's jeez.
But yeah, my dad was like upset about it, and he was like, I was doing so much research, and it's gotten to the point now where my sister and I are positive that they like my husband more than us, because he was like, John was a Boy Scout. He knows how to fix things. He can cook. He makes good money. He's like good with computers, and like I'm only a couple of those things. And my parents are just so interested in him and his life. So I called my mom for like the first time in a couple weeks. It had been too long, and she goes, "Oh, hi, Christopher. How's John?" And I'm like, "Okay." And then she goes, "How's Charlie? Who's my dog?" And then and then they're like, "Okay, so you good too?" And I'm like, "Mom, you just asked about me third."
The dog got more attention.
I know. And but yeah, and like when my sister goes and visits my my family, the first thing they goes, "Have you heard from John?" It's like, come on, guys. Like, we went through this whole process of you hating this. Now you're on the other side. You're too much on the other side. Right,
I want some love too, please. Carol.
I know. I know.
Okay. You get the contenders' attention, so you should feel good. You should, So
yeah. I mean, it can be, contenders' attention can be very awesome. It can be hard at times. I think Ham and I are a very polarizing type of casting duo. If you like us, I think you really like us. If you don't, I think you really don't. And so that's kind of my theory on things. But in the end, about this gay stuff, it was really hard, like growing up. But now I think currently, because of where I live, it's been, and with my parents going through that kind of transformation, the process was long, but I'm glad the journey has taken place. And there's a lot of pain during that journey, but now a lot of that is being reconciled because we can talk about that now and be okay with it. And I've actually gotten to the point now where I feel guilty for not visiting my parents. And that was like never a case, because I didn't do it because it wasn't healthy. Yeah. Right. And, back in 2016, when they told us who they were going to vote for, I was like, if you vote for this man, you're directly saying that you don't support me. Right. And he was like, oh, I get that. And, and that was another point where I was like, okay, he's starting to get it. And now it's like on me, like now I'm being the dick, right? He's gone through all of this process. He needs the reward. I gotta go visit him, and we have the same birthday, so hopefully I'll be up there on August 8th. But that's cool. Yeah, I'm really proud of my parents in that way.
Yeah, they sound wonderful. So I want to kind of jump back to your school life, because you mentioned that you did actually not do that great in school for a lot of it, but you obviously went to college, and you graduated college, right? I believe you did.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah. So. What was that like? That moment where you're like, "Fuck school, I'm done with this. I don't want to."
So when I was a freshman, I got pretty good grades. I was like, I got like a 3.5 or something like that. And then
That's
the
pretty
next
good.
year, it's actually, I've almost failed both of my sophomore years, in college and in high school. It was like, I don't know. I like patterns. But I honestly couldn't tell you what it was. I was probably struggling with some like depression slash anxiety that I didn't know how to like fully care. And I've always had, like, if you would ask my friends, like, one of my biggest flaws is I tend to not really have a sense of urgency when I need to. So like I'm definitely like a Boulder, Colorado person where it's like I'll just go with the flow. The world will, like, if it's gonna go wrong, it'll go wrong, right? Like if I didn't pack this, I'll just buy it. Right. And like that doesn't mesh with some people. Um but yeah, so like throughout, sorry, can you remind me of the question? I kind of lost track.
Yeah. So I was asking you, like, what happened that your grades like
Oh,
started
that's
to
right. That's
plummet?
right. And so I think like all that stuff combined, plus like just the regular rebellious aloofness of a 15-year-old Chris just coming out of his shell, right, and rebelling. I think it was a whole combination where I went to class, but I just didn't listen. And I just like didn't do homework. And the thing that made my teacher so upset is when we had like our standardized tests, I'd always place at the top 10% without doing any of the work. And they got so frustrated at me. And I think to teach me a lesson that I couldn't just take the test and get good grades, they made sure that like that like I needed to do this homework to pass. And one of the best things I think one of my teachers ever did was my chemistry teacher, because I got a D in geometry, which was failing for them, and then I got an F in honors chemistry while also pass advancing our state test, which was the first and only time that teacher had ever seen that. And it was because I didn't do like my final binder, right? Like I didn't turn in a binder. I didn't turn in any of my homework. The only things I turned in were things I finished there. And then she was like, "You're gonna fail. You're gonna have to go to summer school." And then my geometry teacher's like, "You're gonna have to go to summer school and do all this stuff. And I don't know if you can take 2 classes. Like you might have to potentially repeat some of this next year." And I was like, okay, this is scary. Like, I don't want to be that kid. And so I ended up finding a way to do both things. I took geometry online, and I did kind of Chris it up a little bit, where I didn't fail because I was dumb. I failed because I didn't turn in the work. So
Yeah.
because geometry was online, I didn't necessarily have to attend the whole time, and I could just take the tests and pass. So I got a solid C in honors geometry summer school. and and then for chemistry, that was another pretty easy thing, but we did have in-person tests. But yeah, but what that summer school thing did was like, I got to do the work, right? Like, I don't want to do this. I'm doing it in the summer. And if I want to like limit myself, like I can just do it all in one day or something, but I got to do it. And then I did it. And then finally, like, I was like, I need to get out of the East Coast. Like, I got to get out. And my chemistry teacher was the one that was like, if you want to get out, you have to get good grades, right? Or else you're going to go to, a local college. And then at this very same time, I ended up becoming really good at the tuba. Not to toot my own horn, but I was pretty proficient at the instrument in high school. And my band director was like, "All right, let's get you out of here. Like one of the best ways to do it is, since your GPA will, because I got like a 2.1 my sophomore year, since your GPA will probably need a little bit of pushing, like the other thing you could do is be good at an instrument, right?
Yeah.
Or like be good at a sport, and that'll help your chances of getting into some colleges." And I was like, "All right, let's do this." And so I like really pushed myself junior and senior year. I ended up taking like 4 AP classes my junior year, or no, my senior year. And then I ended up killing it my junior year in terms of music. And so by the time I went on auditions, I had a little bit of cred. I was the second best in my district and the 10th best in Virginia on the tuba, which is a very musically inclined state. So I like being top 10. And yeah, and so I got my grades going again. And then I went to college. I took it easy my freshman year because of all those AP courses I took. And then my sophomore year came around. It was like the same exact fucking thing. I like just stopped doing work, and like I stopped going to class. I stopped waking up. I got into some recreational stuff at the time, and that's what college is about, right? And I just, my values were different. I spent too much time partying when I was a sophomore. I went through a raver phase. I was really into dubstep when I was a sophomore and junior in college. I like regret it now, but I loved it. And because we have a really awesome place here called Red Rocks, which is a perfectly acoustical outside venue that if you're in the back seat, it sounds the same as the front seat, because and it's like
Nice.
it's an amphitheater carved into the rock. It's one of the coolest
That's pretty
places.
cool.
If anyone comes to Colorado, you can hike there too. So you got to go to Red Rocks. It's like one of our staples. But anyway, so I used to go to concerts there all the time. And then once again, I was going to be a teacher, and like the whole thing is like, you gotta get your shit together, Chris. Like, this one's on you, man. Like, you're just having too much fun. Like, school's important. And I ended up failing brass methods as a tuba player. Yeah, because I didn't go. I missed 9 classes, so I automatically failed. And so after all that, junior year, I took it way more seriously. I actually ended up failing some of not failing, my progress on the tuba wasn't where it needed to be either, and so I needed to redo some of that, and so I took it super seriously my junior year. It was a little bit harder to be consistent versus high school because I had so much more independence, but I ended up graduating with a 2.999 repeating, which hurts me.
Yeah, which is rough.
Yeah, which hurts me, and it's not the highest GPA in the world, but like I've started to realize as an adult, your GPA doesn't quite matter outside of your very first job. And I was, and my very first job was take a break. There seems to be a pattern. I worked really hard those last 2 years, though. There's some times where I was like, you know what, I'm just not going to do this because I have it. I've done the math. Like, I don't have to do this one in order to get this grade that I need. But after college, I was like, I sold my tuba because I realized that I'm probably not going to be a performer. I was going to be an educator, and it would be better for me to buy something like a saxophone or a trumpet that's somewhere something I can like bring around everywhere. And my professor wanted to buy my tuba. And so I got a pretty penny for that. And that enabled me to take some time off after college. And then when that ran out, I was like, okay, well, I got to find a job. And I ended up becoming a preschool teacher after that. And that was awesome. I did that for 3 years. I had the time of my life.
Did you want to be a preschool teacher? Because you obviously had a music education, but like, how do you end up going from I want to teach music to going to be a preschool teacher?
Yeah, so I took some time off after doing a little bit in middle school. So I was a middle school band director for a short amount of time, and then they did layoffs, and I was the assistant band director. And I was like, I'd cut me. And so they did the layoffs, and I was one of the. It was kind of like last one in, first one out. It's kind of what happens, especially with music programs. And then I just needed a job because I wanted to stay in Boulder, and in order to stay here, I needed to get a job. And one of the only ones at the time that I could like conceivably get within the next couple of months was and I wanted to be a teacher, was in early childhood education. Here in Boulder, we have some of those fancy schmancy $20K a year preschools. And I ended up finding myself at one of those and making a name for myself. I was particularly good at it, and I think it's because I loved it. I thought it was so fun because my whole thing was I struggled with so much identity. I struggled with so much anxiety when I was that age, and because of the the military upbringing, we weren't given tools to deal with anxiety at the time. And I was like, you know what? I get to do this with these kids, right? I get to provide them opportunities to say, hey, I'm done. I'm going to take some space. It's not because I'm mad at you. It's because I need space, right? And to be able to say that to another person, I think is a skill. And so when I first got there, it was like, I don't know if I want to be here. But within a couple months, I was like, this is awesome. Like, these kids are hilarious, right? And, the troll in me it's really easy to troll kids. And so like 1 year, I convinced a kid he was psychic. And with approval from his parents, but that went a little too far. But yeah, so he would say things like, I see mom cleaning up after me instead. And it's like, oh no, he's too smart for this, right? He's transcended the joke. He caught us in our lie pretty much. And, but yeah, and so like I ended up becoming very specialized in social emotional learning and intelligence in young learners, and music was a really great way to connect with them. So I was able to like bring in my keyboard and play and connect with the kids, and they would be able to tell me things that was hard for them to do at home. And we had like the cozy corner that if you were feeling anxious, right, you could go there and identify how you were feeling. You didn't have to leave until you were done feeling that way. And then after a year of that, I was like, you know what, I really dig this. And so I applied for something called the Pyramid Plus approach, which is a specialization in learners with special needs. And so I became like the special education teacher at this preschool, and it was really challenging because you don't get you get so many less resources than a regular school, right? Even though it costs $20,000 a year to go, it's still hard. So my whole thing was integration of the special needs community within general classrooms, because I really think that it's up to the teacher to support integration rather than make it feel like it's hard for them. And I was there to teach the teachers. So that was actually a college class that I taught other teachers at the school and how to integrate learners with special needs within the general population of your classroom. And that was one of the most rewarding experiences of my life. And so through that, I actually, and this goes into how I became a caster, surprisingly. So through that, I ended up becoming pretty well known in the early childhood community because they all took my class, right? And so because of that, there's a really cool school here in Boulder called the Boulder Journey School that does something called a Reggio Emilia approach to learning, which is all about child-centered, child-driven learning. And
I feel like I've heard of this when I was doing my psych
teachers
program,
are not allowed to say, all right, we're doing dinosaurs. Right? Like what they do is observe the children and what they're interested in. If they're all interested in dirt, that's what you use to teach. And I thought that was so cool. And what I did then was around this time, I actually meet John, and my current husband, and he works at a company called Sphero, and they make robotic balls. And I saw their new BB-8 ball, and I was like, or I saw one of their original electric balls on our first date, and I was like, hey, like this is amazing for classrooms, right? Because it makes sounds and reacts to you. And they had never thought about using it for like little kids, right? Because they were going over to like the coding side of things, like the eighth grade to the high school age. And I was like, no, like I think these kids would love this, and I could do so much social emotional stuff. And so I created a curriculum around robots, not for science and math, but for social emotional learning and intelligence, that the Boulder Journey School ended up adopting, and that sent me over onto the TED Talk world. Right. So I ended up doing some Boulder Journey School, not Boulder Journey. I ended up doing a ton of like Boulder Startup Week talks, TED-like talks, going to conferences and speaking in front of large groups of people. And that's when I was like, I like this public speaking thing a lot.
It's a lot of fun.
Like this is super fun, and I'm good at it. And it was, something. It's been a while since, and I didn't have an instrument at the time. It had been a while until I found a craft of something that I could, like, it was teaching at the time, but like something I like truly actually loved. Spoiler alert, I ended up quitting teaching. But like I really, really liked speaking and spreading this information, because the curriculum was, with these robots, the child can decide how it reacts. If you go child to child learning for this, I don't know what Blake's going to say. Like if this kid's like, I want to play, right? But the child can create that world with this robot because it can also react accordingly, right? So the kids were more likely to solve problems with this robot that they ended up naming Cooper than they would with another person. So once they did it with the robot, it was so much easier for them because they had that backing knowledge to solve problems with friends. And then like I saw them growing with it. It was one of the coolest things that I've ever seen. Then I added the BB-8. One, because I'm a nerd and wanted them to know Star Wars. And two, because it had a movable head and it could actually nod to you and say goodbye. The kids really bought into this. So what ended up happening was they ended up like drawing Sphero as their first shape. The logo was like the first thing that they would draw. The Sphero was the first thing that they would do, like interact with. Like if a new student came, they could hang out with Sphero and feel like they had somebody. It was like they had to ask each other to use it. And Sphero had its own personality, and they all accommodated it. So when new kids came, they knew how to deal with new people. And that wasn't the original intention. That's all just kind of like what built off of this. And then the Boulder Journey School was like, this is great. Let's take this. And I did the TED Talks. I was like, I really, really love this. And then during this time, I'm learning Hearthstone, right? And I'm like, you know what? Let's go to a tournament, right? Let's do this. One of my friends was very, very good at Hearthstone. Still is. He's a legend player. And we were like, okay, you're going to win, but we can all go, right? And I had just started to learn, and we went to a LAN center that was very popular here called Clutch Gaming Arena. And which Louis and Calvin, the Overwatch people, were on their original team, by the way. But yeah, and so I ended up losing in the first round, and this is where you start knowing where I'm going with this. Someone didn't show up, and my husband was like, "This guy wants to cast," because we had been talking about it for so long. And that was my first casting gig, and I went through the Hearthstone world for a time, and then Justin connected me with Carbon Entertainment, who did season 0, and the rest is history.
Yeah. So I kind of want to ask you, like, at this time we were watching Hearthstone, did you start to watch other, or getting into Hearthstone, were you watching other esports at the time?
Yeah, actually, I watched a lot of them. I was definitely that person who consumed like esports content but didn't play the game.
Were you ever into like League of Legends? Like I know you played it for a
Yeah,
while, but were you like into the esport?
I was very much into League of Legends. Rivington was actually one of, you might watch this, but Rivington was one
Probably
of my
not.
like first like esports like crushes.
Oh,
Right,
okay.
that I'm like, oh man, like, and he got me noticing the casters actually, and so I was like, oh, this is casting, but really it was tastosis in StarCraft that I was like, wow, this is a craft, right? Because I remember this was with my ex at the time, and this is like at the tail end of our relationship. He took me to a bar craft. I had a blast. I got so drunk. And I had a blast at this bar craft. And I was like, I want more of this. And so I ended up getting super into watching StarCraft. And then League of Legends, I started playing. I started playing when Darius came out.
Okay.
And then, so that was a little while ago. And then after, I played League for so long. League was like where my friends were. Like we watched a bunch of it. Double IP weekends. We'd stay up all night and play. And League of Legends is where like my like playing love really started. It was StarCraft is where like I was like, oh, I can watch this, and it was still really fun because StarCraft is too intimidating for me. And then League of Legends was something I could play and was moderately good at, and so I was like, cool, like let's play it. So I played that for a very long time.
Yeah, I was just kind of surprised that, like, because I know there was a community in League of Legends, and you were into League of Legends called House Party. They used to do like tournaments, and they used to cast, and like famously, Captain Flowers is actually from there, who coaches or casts League of Legends now, because I used to do some work with there. And I was just like I remember there was a couple times it was out there. I'm like, I wonder if Boop was ever in there, because I remember being in there quite a bit.
I didn't know. I never thought I could be a League of Legends caster, right? I would see it. I knew all the names, I knew the strategies, but I didn't know there were resources. I didn't know there was no like big advertising push like BGG had, a year ago, right? Where it was like, oh, this is the place where people like Uber were like, go to BGG, right? That wasn't there, and I didn't know. And my ex at the time was not like supportive of that side of things.
Okay.
Because I don't think he knew I was interested. And so I didn't know I was interested, and there were resources. And then like, I just needed a conversation with someone that was like, you should do that, right? Like you have the personality to where you could be on camera, right? And I finally had that conversation, and then I happened to be learning Hearthstone at the time, and my best friend Bo happened to be a legend player, and I was like, oh, okay, like if I were to cast with someone, I could cast with Bo.
Yeah.
Unfortunately for that first tournament, he ended up winning, so he never casted. But I ended up casting with someone else, and it just came pretty naturally, to be completely honest. And I think Hearthstone was a great first one to go for, because I'm really good at filling space.
Yeah.
And Hearthstone, I think, really tests that kind of, I like to call it like figure skating type of casting, right? Where, you're going like this, and when something happens, you're like, oh my goodness, right? But you're not going to have like, oh, and then the Graviton Surge comes out, and there's all 6 people in it, blah, 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 right? You're not going to have that. And if I wasn't casting Hearthstone, I would have never started to cast Overwatch, because during this peak time, I was starting to become a Blizzard fanboy, and whatever they did was something I was going to do, right? And then Overwatch was about to come out, and I bought Overwatch Origins at BlizzCon when they announced it on the floor on my phone, right? I was like, this is going to be fun, and I was just getting to casting. I was like, I could cast this game, right? And then I ended up getting involved with Carbon Entertainment. I casted with Left Guy for a couple games, and that's something that a lot of people forget. It's that I was a caster before I was a host. I was Left Guy's casting partner for like 3 or 4 series. And through Carbon Entertainment, I met all the Owl guys and got to hang out with them during season 0. And all of them are solid individuals.
They are.
And then through that, I also meet Evie. I meet everyone like at BGG because of Carbon Entertainment. And it's all about opportunity meets preparation at that point.
Yeah, I can honestly say that, like, having worked with the Gladiators, one of the things that I take away the most from like being involved in Owl was that I got to meet all of these people who I like appreciate so much now, like so much. Like they're so intelligent, they're so smart. They all deserve how they like got there and the hard work that they put in, and like telling those stories, I think is something that's kind of important with that. So kind of looking at your road into esports and kind of how you got in there. You had talked a little bit about how like being a host was something that people like recommended would be easier to get into. and that you like casting, but is there a reason why you're not like, well, let's just host, right? Like, why not just go for the thing that everyone says I'm going to be good in?
There is a reason, and I am going to credit this with season 0 when I was doing, Boop the Week and the shoulder content.
Yeah.
Going way back at the top 5 plays. Anytime that I would be sitting there and I'd see, Brennan ZP walk into the back and cast, in my mind, I just would be like, I want to do that. Like hosting this show just like isn't good enough for me. And then it just every time I think about being a host, right? I can't help but think that it's kind of like the tuba, where it was something that I was good at, but not necessarily something that I want to do my whole life in, right? And just focus on hosting, because in my mind, you should be able to host and cast no problem. And so, I think that hosting helps casting and casting helps hosting. So why not do both? But anytime I would see someone cast, I'd be the host. Like even at BGG, when I was like doing solids and filling in for hosts, like even with the casters, I just be like, man, I want to cast right now, right? Like this seems so much fun, and casting is just so much fun. And the type of work casting is a little bit more. I think it speaks to me a little bit more. It's a little bit more fulfilling, I think. Though I have started to change that recently, because at this point, like I love casting, and it's something I want to do forever. Like I'm happiest when I'm casting. The thing about hosting though is that like I'm starting to really like it too, right? And I'm actually going to be hosting a show with UGC events starting next week. And it's like a 20 episode run. I'm really excited about it, and I get to be a host again. It's going to be
so
awesome.
When this episode comes out, it will have been probably 2 weeks after that next week. Just an FYI.
Well, that's fine. But there's going to be 20 episodes.
I'm excited. What's it about? Can you tell us what it's about?
Yeah, so it's going to be called Overwatch Lately. It's about what's going on in Overwatch lately. And basically, they were more into something like a little bit more casual. The idea that they said was like, we'd like something like The Tonight Show, where like there could be even comedic content, which I was known for a bit of time.
Yes.
Comedic content. 100 Owl was amazing. I don't bring it up that much because it's from last season, but there's some good videos. If you like Tim and Eric, 100 Owls where to go. But the overarching theme of all of this is I really wanted to host my own show because I thought that I could be pretty good at it, right? And I have like a natural tendency amongst my group of friends. I'm actually a licensed facilitator as well, so it's something that I want to, like, I know I can do, and now like I feel confident enough to like go do it on my own. And I'm really, really excited about it. So it's just what's going on in Overwatch League. So the way that's going to go, it's going to be like a summary of events for the first 15 minutes. And then the second 15 minutes is going to be some type of skit, or it's going to be like a miscellaneous thing where it could be like a 100 Owl thing. It could be a Boop of the Week. It could be something else, or something that the guest decides. And then we'll do an interview for the last about 30 minutes or so.
Okay.
So it's only an hour long, but they wanted it to be a little bit more lighthearted, a little bit more on the side of like a Seth Meyers type of situation. And I was like, I think I'm good for that. And and so that's gonna be what it's about. And so the idea here is too, though, is that like it's not going to be like an Overwatch TMZ type of thing, but I really want to get to know the guest on there and ask like those important questions. And the guest will be there the entire time. So while only the last portion is about them, they'll be able to interact with the rest of it. So they'll be there. If like we show a skit, they'll be able to be there and watch it and review it later or something like that. One of the ideas I have is to tell you, because something Ham and I are starting to do is we're trying to use their real names in cast, and some of them are actually pretty awesome, like Lewis Power, right? So the game would be like, who is Lewis Power, right? To like another Contenders caster, and see how that goes. We want to do like a newlywed game with casters, so like Ham and I versus like Jaws and Leg Day. That would be super fun. But yeah, it should be pretty lighthearted. I want it to be funny, closer to like Streamer Showdown than like Around the Payload.
Okay. So I have to ask you something. Obviously, you're very dedicated to Blizzard and Overwatch. And this is going to be kind of a harder question. Do you think that there is room in Overwatch for new casters or new hosts? Because from the outside looking in, it doesn't feel that way.
I get that. I will rebuff, because I've heard a lot of people tell me why. And I'll definitely go into some dynamics too, because I think Eevee comes into play here as well. But why would you say that? Why would you say that it looks hard to coming in?
So the reason that I would say that it looks hard coming in, kind of taking it from my perspective, is the people who are in there are very good. There's kind of I don't know if there's necessarily a need for more casters, and I don't see those casters leaving anytime soon. That would be one.
Okay, so Hearthstone went through this as well, and I believe just recently they've started to change some of their casters. But I think Hearthstone was like Frodan, Kibler, Raven, Soddle. I'm missing two more, but it was them for like 3 years. Right at the upper echelon, and I definitely see how that can be the case. If it wasn't for BGG, I would say most likely. And the reason why I said Eevee would be brought into this is because there is a little bit of a gender dynamic that gets played amongst other female talent, which I've discussed with a variety of people. Which is when there is a woman already on the staff, they feel like they've already filled that quota and they don't need another one.
Yeah.
So I see that. Like, I could totally like see how you could feel that way, because there's a lot of proof like in the pudding, right? It just happens to be that way a lot of the time, right? You got your one non-white guy, your one woman, and who's usually your host, right? And you check the boxes, but I honestly would probably agree with you right now. It feels really hard, and not only because it doesn't feel like there's space, it also there's an overarching negative feeling, I think, around Overwatch in general. It's like cool to be negative in the community at times, like whether it's about the meta, whether it's about talent, whether it's about Overwatch League, or Nans are leaving, or everyone seems to go down the negative route first. And I see how, because that's how people think. But if you're a caster and you're trying to break into Overwatch, the number one thing is it's like you got to grind. You never know when so-and-so might have a kid and leave. You never know when I decide, this is not the case. I'm just using myself as an example because I don't want to like push that on someone else. That I'm like, you know what? This is too like this contractor life is too hard. I need a stable job. I own a house, right? Like I need to be able to provide for my family. And I did this for a good amount of time, and I just didn't get to the place where this could be sustainable, right? Like that can happen to a lot of people. But the reason why it feels that way now is because Overwatch League in its current iteration doesn't have that opportunity to expand along with contenders, because they are, I think, trying to keep things as consistent as possible. And the reason why Ham and I got brought on is because, we provide something different, right? They don't want you to like every single casting pair. That's actually something we were told, right? It's like, I was talking to Monty, and it might have not been Monty actually, but anyway, I was talking to someone involved in Overwatch League where it was Doa, and he was like, Monty and I do really good with older audiences, right? So we're good at that. And, Uber has, his audience. And if the audience liked everybody, then everyone would be the same. Yeah. Right. So it's better to offer variety than to offer monotonousness. And it's okay because something that's really hard, and with the whole Jane thing going on, it's topical right now. It's like people on the internet can be really mean. Oh yeah. Right. And people can forget that they're, it's so hard when you're going up in front of a camera and trying your best, and you could potentially be proud of your product, and then reading in chat, I hate these casters, right? When you've put yourself out there and you tried, and your best wasn't good enough for this mysterious person on the internet, but it still hurts, right? And that can be hurtful to, I think, the overall esports culture, right? It's just like, why would you want to put yourself through that? And so you get people who automatically need to have that thick skin, but who are we eliminating because of that as well? Is kind of what I question. What kind of people who might not necessarily have gravitated to this, that might be amazing at it, might have just been gatekeeped out, right? Just because of like who we are. Because I've done some of that gatekeeping, right? Like on accident, or just because it just happened that way, right? That like I participated in some of that, and looking back, that feels really gross, and I wish I hadn't done it. But sometimes it just happens, and it sucks. And and with today's announcement, with all of the fact that like there's going to be tons of homesteads, there's no way these same casting pairs are going to go to every single one of them. And so my thought process is, especially the ones in China, especially the ones in Europe, they're most likely going to be sending people there. And this is all assumptions, but like a lot of the, some of the Overwatch League casters have connections to Sweden, for example,
Yep.
right? And so maybe they'll be the ones who stick around in, Germany slash wherever those are, right? The future of Overwatch casting has not been decided just yet, especially with these homesteads becoming more and more popular. And I think with the expansion of Overwatch League, there's going to be an inevitable expansion, hopefully, in tier 2, because I think more people will be interested in Overwatch, and the fact that you can travel around the world will be more of an incentive to participate in contenders. And live your dream out in Korea and play games, right? And so I think as of right now, it has been pretty tough. I know the opportunities have not been out there, and the same people are getting the same opportunities, right? It's like when Leg Day and Jaws and ZP and Avast cover Korea and North America, and potentially these, they did the Gauntlet, and they get a lot of these opportunities, and it even feels like that for me sometimes, right? Ham and I have been passed up for every single thing outside of contenders so far, and there's some longevity that we need to get there, and ZP and Avast are great and they deserve it. And honestly, I'd probably send them over us based on like social media influence, and all that stuff. It makes sense, but
well,
it still feels bad, right?
I had Anders Bloom on the show, who is a pretty big CSGO caster, actually probably known as like being the voice of CSGO for a long time. And one of the things that he said is it's very common that once a group of casters gets picked, they basically get it until they start saying no. Right, like that's like a huge thing, which eventually can happen, especially if you think about traveling over across the world, right? And you having games 6 months out of the year, a lot of times people don't want to be everywhere all the time. And so depending on like that dynamic and stuff, or how many things that they're doing, like you can't be everywhere. And so once people start saying no, then what happens is the dynamic is then they start to look at other people. Who's next up? Who do we start to ask? And those people almost always say yes to everything because they're looking like. And so then they get kind of brought in, and I can kind of understand that dynamic in the opportunity being that there might be a lot more influx of casters actually needed.
And I think what that does is it inevitably challenges the peak as well, because there's just more people, right? And even though you're the peak, I think that's always good to remind yourself that there's other people coming up, right? And more so, I think in the contenders world, that Ham and I feel like at any given season we can be dropped, right? Because that's just kind of how the entertainment industry is. Like, are we good enough? Have we gotten enough fans and support over the the 3 seasons that we have like a stake in contenders now? And while I think I think the answer is closer to yes than no on that one, you never know. Yeah. Right. And you never know when that next opportunity might come either. And so you might not get an opportunity in Overwatch, but that doesn't mean that another opportunity in another game isn't going to pop up. And that to me tells you should still be casting some Overwatch, right? Mm-hmm. You got to keep your chops going. And in my opinion, Overwatch is arguably the hardest game to cast. And if you can cast Overwatch, you're most likely going to be able to cast most other things. And so if you're in the community, like, you got to keep cutting your teeth. I think Lemon and Hurix are like almost there. I think that there are some other people coming up in BTG. There's a kid who just turned 18 and finally can like focus in on some of this casting named Rien. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he's going to be a star. Like, he is going to be a star, no question about it. I think Lemon and Hurix can be those people too. It's just unfortunate that I think some people need to move up. I think ZP and Avast are like on the brink. I think Jaws and Leg Day are on the brink potentially of this. I don't have any information. This is just what I think. If I were to look at all of the contenders casters, Pixie, Avril, Jaws, Leg Day, ZP and Avast would be my choices to graduate for the next level. And when they do, there will be some openings. It's just in esports, you got to stay on top of the wave. If the wave overtakes you, then you're just going to be waiting. Right, for the next wave. You got to stay on top. And sometimes that means switching games. Sometimes that means, sticking it out. But I think the opportunities are going to come.
Okay. Kind of looking at the contender scene, and kind of you like mentioning that you think that the contender scene might grow. It's something like has been very kind of confusing to me if you look at kind of the dynamic of how the contender scene is kind of set up with the academy teams and the non-academy teams. And like, for me, it brings up large questions of what kind of system do we want? And how are we going to make it kind of sustainable? Because right now it seems like a lot of the non-academy teams, I don't know how they're sustainable, right? Like, especially if they're paying people. And it feels like there's nothing really set by Blizzard to kind of enforce, like, what do they want the contender scene to be? Okay, that's the feeling that I get is like it's unknown. It's like we're just gonna see what happens. We're gonna leave it alone. This is very laissez-faire about it. What would you like to see the contenders see being? I know I've had other people say they'd like to see it all academy teams. I'd like other people say that they wish it was just completely open, and that there was higher prize money to kind of justify winning and stuff like that. What do you wish that the contender scene would be?
So something that I always talk about when it comes to contenders is I always feel like the OWL is NFL and contenders is NCAA, right? And to take a little bit more influence from what that kind of separation is, because what I love college football. I actually have a quasi like encyclopedic knowledge of college football and a lot of other college sports because I like the amateurishness of it. I like the fact that it's not as clean. I like the type of passion that college sports has, and I see that in contenders, right? Because in college you have a scholarship. They're actually getting more than some of our contenders players are, but still like. There's this like special little something I think that college offers that the NFL will never be able to do because it is part of like that amateur scene, right? It's not as polished. And for me, I don't need polish for it to be a good game, right? It's part of the reason why I love South American Overwatch so much because no one knows what's going to happen in any of these fights, right? And that kind of like, oh my goodness, anyone can take anyone is really fun for me. The parity in contenders this season has actually been pretty good outside of the top two teams, Cincy and Atlanta. And from that, I think what needs to happen is they need to figure out what's going on with Overwatch League, right? They need these homesteads to happen. They need the vision to be fulfilled, right? The vision that was initially set out at Contender Season 0 of what Overwatch League was going to do, because it kind of like another idea that I had was like, it's kind of like my mom, right? Where Overwatch League is my sister and I'm contenders. And like, eventually I got some attention, but first my sister needed to go to college, right? Like, I think Overwatch League needs to get the homesteads going. They got to find their talent, like their permanent talent. If they need more, they need to, the logistics need to be figured out because it still doesn't feel real until it does, right? Once they've got that focus down, once they've got that kind of going, I think they'll be able to give a little bit more time to contenders, which, has gotten a little bit of support. I think the Gauntlet and the Showdown are great for expanding the scene and showing off some players. I don't think some players get promoted without these lands, like an Ellie Vote, right? Without Gauntlet or without Showdown, I don't think Ellie Vote gets promoted as quickly as he does, even though he deserves it. And in terms of academy teams versus non-academy teams, like I'm going to bring back the NCAA example again. One of the best parts about NCAA basketball is seeing a school like Florida Gulf Coast take down a Duke. Right. And that can happen. And I think we got to provide teams opportunities to do that. And while Uprising Academy, has struggled in the past, like it's not the same kind of fanfare, right, as when a phase 2 beats a Gladiators Legion. Right. To me, that's like more impactful storyline wise and season wise than everyone just being an academy team, if that makes sense. And, I get the whole academy side of things. It's going to be more sustainable that way. But I would hate for a team like Second Wind from last season, right, to not be able to compete just because they're Second Wind. Right. Okay. And so, Yeah,
I think that answers the question pretty well. So one of the things I totally forgot to ask about earlier, and I kind of wanted to ask now, because I think it's something important to you, is Boulder Games. Okay.
Yeah.
How the fuck did you get from being a teacher to Boulder Games?
Okay, so this is really funny because the day that I left the school, my friend and I had already been thinking about leaving, and I was telling my friend,
why are you thinking about leaving?
They were not hyper supportive of the robot stuff.
Okay.
So just I was a little bit of a loose cannon at the time because I was like feeling it as a teacher. I was like, this works. Like, why don't you want me to do this? It's because technology is one of those things in schools that you have to get approved of, blah, blah, and I didn't do that. And so my idea of what education looked like was very different than the new principal that was there for that last year. And I was like, man, I am not really enjoying myself, even though I was still a lead teacher at the time, and I still had the respect of the principal. I could tell I wasn't exactly what they wanted either, and so it was mutual in that way. So that day, I believe I'm 24 or 25 at the time, maybe 26. That day, my buddy Devin, who works at Boulder Games, who I said that I was like, I'm thinking about quitting my job, goes, hey, we need someone at Boulder Games to do social media. Would you be interested? And I was like, hell yeah, let's do it. And he told me how much I'd be getting paid, and it was more. So like,
I'd say I'm surprised teachers get paid shit.
Yeah. And I was like, cool, let's do it. And so while I was at Boulder Games, I initially was doing social media. I actually had this really cool idea where now that I think about it like out loud, I don't know how cool it is, but we were making mobile games at the time, and I thought it'd be really fun to do a whole like bit about how we play our games while we poo, and that our games are perfect for when you go to the bathroom. And that was like my first idea. And actually they really thought that was they liked how creative it was, right? And that it wasn't just like, let's go to Facebook and use, Facebook advertising, right? It was like an actual thing. And Peggy and Ty, the bosses of Boulder Games, are amazing people. It's kind of like they take these like unpolished, dogs and wolves from the street and groom them when they're in Boulder Games. And the joke was like, after Boulder Games, everyone gets their dream job, which is super true. And so they like took me under their wing, and we were actually very close to shutting down because our business is very unique. So Boulder Games is not just mobile games. That's kind of like what we do for fun. What Boulder Games really was, it was a company called Boulder Interactive, and we sold interactive technology to theme parks. So Disney was one of our main clients and was our only client at the time. And Peggy saw in me like someone who could sell, right? That I could be a salesman and someone who could do business development. And I was like, does this mean I can go to Universal Studios for work? And they're like, yeah. And I was like, all right, I'm in. And then I ended up getting some really substantial contracts over the year and a half that I did it, because so that's how I ended up at Boulder Games. Peggy saw in me a chance to sell, and so I started learning business development. She guided me through the way, but then she kind of realized that I could do it my own way, and I ended up developing hundreds upon hundreds of contacts within the themed entertainment industry. And I also got them a government contract, which should be good for them for the next couple of years. And because of that, I ended up being in a place where like they were good on contracts for like a year or two. And then they were like, hey, Chris, I like see that there's like not much you can do right now. Like you can develop more contacts, but like we're good right now, right? And Peggy, through some of the contacts that I made some more contacts with her. We're still working with Disney. They just bought a warehouse, and Peggy knew that I was really wanting to be a caster. I was working with BGG at the time, at the same time, doing our European and South American casts. And Peggy was like, I see you kind of like. She's like, you don't want to be a salesman. You're just good at it. And I'm like, okay, I don't know where this conversation is going. And she was like, I know you're really passionate about this esports thing. And she was like, I really want you to pursue this, right? And because I was kind of like not doing as much as I guess I could have, but they were good. Like, they were getting a little frustrated that I was there and they were paying me, and I really like was just kind of chilling. And she was also like, throughout all this, is something that I've realized is you are passionate about stuff like this. And I would hate for you, and I actually repeat this now. She said, I would hate for you in like 6 years to have looked back and see that you had momentum and a passion, but chose to go with the money. And I was like, wow, like that's really impactful. She's like, I'll let you think about it, but if you want to take like 6 months to a year, call us after. We'll give you a job right back. And she's like, I want you to do this. And she's like, if it fails in like 2 or 3 months, call us back. We'll help you out. Like, we support you. And that was kind of like the last thing I needed to like fully delve deep into this casting thing. And so now, I've got a nice little safety net that I hope to not use. But it's there. And that's just part of like the supportive atmosphere that Boulder Games always had with me. Was I think they knew I was good at selling, but esports was always what I talked about. It's what I talked about at work. It's like, I was like, oh, look at me, I did this thing. And I think they started realizing that like, it was probably time for me to pursue this, because Peggy was like my mom, right? And she guided me through a lot of my like late professional 20s to learn like how to work at a job. And because being a preschool teacher doesn't quite do that. In my opinion, is like being an EMT, right? It's such like a unique work world that I think it doesn't really help you in the general work stuff outside of like working on a team. Like, I was in an office, and Peggy and Ty and everyone else were so supportive of it all. Like, they would put on my casts when I would leave and watch it all together. And without that support, I would have never made the jump, which ended up helping me get contenders.
Okay, that's awesome. Like they sound like wonderful. Like every time someone talks about like what I'm like, oh my god, I want to meet though. Like it's
Peggy and you know, and the crazy thing about Peggy and Ty is there's like four other of me's like that can tell the same story about
that's pretty
those two.
impressive.
Like there was one of our workers who unfortunately he was doing two jobs, but he lost his main gig because we do some really cool stuff. Like we do a lot of machine learning, so a lot of people will come like do like a thing for fun and then leave. And unfortunately, his main gig stopped, and they let him stay at their house like until he was on his feet, and they also paid him the money to be on his feet, and because he worked for us at the time. And they're just so selfless in that way. um they're just amazing people. They it almost is to a fault, right? When they get so close to their workers, they get so like they care so much about all of us that sometimes it can be an issue.
Yeah.
But most of the time it's all about growth for us, and I'm a better person because of them.
Yeah, they sound like amazing. So that I really only have one last question for you. If there's anything else you wanted to bring up, you're more than welcome to. But I feel like this has been pretty fun and insightful, and I like learning about you. You're a cool person. So my last question, very easily or hard, depending on who you are, is having had the experience of being on the show and telling us all about your life and who you are as a person. If you could see anyone to be on this show, the only criteria is they have to speak English and be involved in esports in some way. Who would you pick? And if you pick someone who I've already had, I will let you know.
I have an easy answer for you. Okay, so something that I've been super into because I really want her on my show too. Recently, I've discovered drag queen streamers recently, and there is a whole team of them called the Stream Queens, and one of them, Angel, is a Masters level Overwatch player, and is absolutely hilarious. Like I love her. She's got like 300 viewers right now per stream, so she's getting there in terms of popularity. But the reason why I think she'd be great for something like this is because they actually, you know, drag mothers. Her drag mother, I believe, was Deer, who was like one of the first drag queen streamers who like helped her get going. And so what they do is they like put on makeup for like the first like they get in drag for like the first 2 hours of their stream, and then they stream for like another 4 or 5 hours. And Angel, one, is really good at Overwatch, but also is like super into like community based things and being open and like having people in the, you know, in the LGBTQIA community like have a place to be and watch a streamer and be, you know, safe and fun. And you chop that on the fact that I think she's super smart and intelligent as well, and someone I think that needs to be a little bit more forward facing in our community, because I think if just like the right people saw her, she'd just blow up. And she's just like so great. She's great to her community. I've never really seen her be mean to anybody, and when she is, it's always in like a super snarky, sassy way that makes it funny. And that would be it. Angel XOXO. That's her name.
I'm gonna ask you to actually write that for me because I'm never gonna fucking remember that.
Yeah, like watch her stream. It's good. Like you'll learn Overwatch. She's a Masters level player too, so like she's got everything, I think. And she is really inspirational to me because it's always been really hard for me. I'm not like I'm 100% open in terms of my sexuality, right? If someone asks me, or if I have a story about my husband, I'll go ahead and tell it. But it's not something that I will lead with most of the time. Like I don't have a rainbow on my profile. I don't have, you know, I'm not necessarily there yet with that. We talked about my past, so like there's still a little bit more time I think that I need. But seeing people like Angel and, you know, the Stream Queens be out there, be themselves, like, for me is so great to see like if they can do it, I can do that too, and I can be myself in this community as well. And seeing that represented through them has been a really good growth opportunity for me as well.
I like that. I like that a lot. So I normally don't do shout outs. If you want any shout outs, you're more than welcome to have them. So I will give you that floor here briefly if you would like to do any of those.
Is this where I do my like self tags, like find me on Twitter?
If you want to, you can. I mean, anyone who's watching should be able to see, like, because I do put it on here. But
of course, I'd like to shout out my partner, Evie Ham Tornado Fung. I have talked a lot about John, so he's gotten his love. And with Evie though, like the thing about Evie that the reason why I think makes us work is she's actually a lot like my husband in the way that she acts and interacts with me. And no wonder we get along so well. I actually call her my work wife. And if it wasn't for her, I wouldn't be just where I am today. She's the one that has if I grind, she is a super grinder, right? And she works so very hard, and that's very, very inspirational to me. Like to see her working, and doing something while I'm playing like TFT or something. That's like, oh shit, I gotta work now, right? And we work so well together. It's one of the greatest things to be able to work with your friend, and that has come up with challenges at times because we don't agree on everything. But in the end, to have the safety of knowing that we don't agree on everything and it will be okay later is something that is an opportunity I think provided by few people in one's life. And so that's my shout outs to my casting partner Evie.
Awesome. I like that. I'm excited for the future for both of you because I think it's going to be very, very good. So I just want to thank you so much for being on the show. I've had a lot of fun.
Of course.
I hope you've had a lot of fun. If not, then suck it up. You got to deal with it. Everyone who's been watching, I hope you enjoyed the episode. This has been Deep Dives into the Minds of Esports. My name is Blake Panashevitz, and until next time, I hope you all have a wonderful day. And we are good.